friends, welcome to our channel, or welcome back to our channel. I am here today to tell you my birth story. A lot has happened in our life since we last posted. The last vlog that went up was our baby moon. Went to Disneyland with my parents for a weekend for our baby moon / my dad's birthday. Super fun. Then we have moved. We bought a new house. We've settled in here. And then in December, our precious little girl who's sitting here with me was born. So this is Noelle. She was born on December 14th. Her due date was December 16th. She's 6 weeks old today as I'm filming this. She is so precious. She's napping right now. She's gonna hang out with me, huh? We're just gonna hang out, yeah. She's gonna hang out right here while I film the video. She was born on December 14th. My due date was December 16th. So she came almost exactly right on time. I delivered about an hour and a half away from where I live right now. We had lived there when I had gotten pregnant, found my doctor, everything like that. Loved my doctor. And then we moved back. And so I decided to keep my doctor, keep the hospital, everything like that. So I delivered an hour and a half away. So I guess just jump right on in. On the 13th, I started having contractions about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They were really mild, but they just were consistent. They weren't stopping. We had been tracking contractions for like weeks at that point. You know, they would start and stop and start and stop. And there was a couple nights around that same week that I thought that I might be going into labor. Like I had contractions for like 2 hours straight, you know, every 5 minutes or so. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go to bed and I'll either wake up in the middle of the night in labor or I'll wake up in the morning not in labor. And every single time I woke up not in labor. So 3 o'clock started having contractions. We were timing them. They were pretty consistent. They never really stopped. My parents came over to have dinner that night. We went for a walk and everything. We're just like talking, still timing contractions. My parents also were going to drive up with us. With COVID, they could not be in the hospital with me when I delivered. I could only have one support person, which was my husband, Jason. But they were going to drive up with us. Since it was an hour and a half drive, you never really know what's going to happen in labor. And my dad is a paramedic, so should he have to deliver a baby on the side of the road, at least someone knew what they were doing. So that was the plan, was for them to drive up with us and then come back home and take care of Groot, who is our puppy who's sitting right over there. That's why I like that way. So yeah, that was the plan. So we had dinner. I made dinner that night and everything. It was a new recipe actually, so now we jokingly call it was a pasta dish. We call it the labor pasta because we had it the night I went into labor. So we were sitting there and everything, we're just talking. It's like 6 o'clock and I'm like, you know what, maybe we probably should just go to Prescott. Like they're not stopping. It's been, you know, 3 hours or so. We should probably just go just to be safe, because I'd rather go and they send us home than, you know, wait and then not make it to the hospital, since it is an hour and a half away. So my parents head home, they take Groot with them, we pack up the car, you know, all the stuff, and then we go and get gas and we head up there. So mind you, this whole time we're driving, this hour and a half, it takes about 2.5 hours to get there because my husband is driving under the speed limit. I'm like, surely he's gonna speed up. Like if my contractions get really worse, he's gonna speed up, right? So at this point, I could still breathe through them, I could still talk through them. They were getting a little bit more uncomfortable. You know, I was having to kind of take a deep breath just to kind of settle myself a little bit, but nothing too terrible. They were coming consistently every 4 to 5 minutes, and they had been pretty much the whole afternoon. So we get to the hospital. Now I will say I had an amazing experience at the hospital I delivered at. I had some of the best nurses, fantastic. The only person I had a problem with was the tech who let us into the building. So we get there, you know, you have to pick up a phone to like get into the unit. So I do, you know, they ask me why I'm there. I tell them, they ask what my due date was. At this point, this tech is like at the door, you know, the door's open, but I'm still like on the phone with this lady telling her everything. So she asked what my due date was. I'm like, it's Thursday. And so I get off the phone with her and everything. The lady lets us into the building, gives us masks. And she's like, what's on Thursday? And I was like, oh, my due date's on Thursday. And she's like, I would have guessed you were 30 weeks, maybe. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I was very small, mind you, in my pregnancy, very small. I had a very tiny belly. It took forever for anyone to even think I might be pregnant. I was very small, so I'm just used to hearing that. So I'm like, yeah, I know, I get that, but no, my due date's on Thursday, you know, in a few days. And so she takes us back, takes us to triage, you know, she can ask why we're there, tell her again. She looks at me, this woman looks at me and says, is this your first baby? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, is that why you're smiling? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I'm just like a nice person. Like, I'm not gonna be rude to you just because I'm like having contractions. Like that seems so mean to me. So I said, yes. And she goes, that's why you're smiling. You're gonna be going home. Pretty much I wasn't actually in labor, which I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not, but like most first-time moms end up going to the hospital, not in actual labor. So I'm like, okay. She's like, we'll hook you up and see. So then the nurse comes in, hooks me up, monitors my contractions, asks me questions, everything like that. And she's like, okay, yeah, you are having contractions every 5 minutes, or 45 minutes, I think is what she said. She's like, you're dilated to a 4. At my last appointment, I had been at like a 2, almost a 3. So I was dilated to 4, I had dilated a bit more. She was like, we'll monitor you for an hour and see where you're at and then go from there. I'm like, okay. So my parents are in the parking lot because they'd driven up with us. So I called them, like, hey, they're going to keep us for an hour and then, we'll go from there. I was like, you guys should just head home. It's late. It's 8:30 at this point. I'm like, you guys should just head home. It's late. If we get released tonight, I'll let you know. If we get admitted, I'll also let you know. But you can't come in, so there's no reason for you to just sit in the parking lot. So they head out. Literally, it takes me as long to make that phone call, probably like less than 5 minutes. And the nurse comes back in. And she's like, oh, I just ran to the doctor in the hallway. She said, since you'll be 40 weeks at midnight, 41 weeks, actually is what she said. 41 weeks at midnight, we're going to admit you. And I'm like, I'm not 41 weeks. Like in my head, I'm like, I'm not 41 weeks. I'm so confused where this came from. Mind you, this doctor is not my doctor, but he works in the same office as my doctor. So I'm like, where did this 41 weeks come from? I was so confused. But I also was like, well, I think I'm in labor. We also had told the nurse that we live 2 hours away. So, if I was just in too early labor, then sending me home wasn't a great option because it's not like I live 5 minutes away and can just come back. I live 2 hours away. And so I'm like, where does 41 weeks come from? But I wanted to have my baby. So I'm like, okay, like admit me, cool. Like I think I'm in labor, like let's go. And so they admit me. I wasn't going to correct them on 41 weeks. To clarify where that came from. Yeah, that was cute. My original due date, I think, was the 8th, I want to say. And so if you had gone off of that, my original due date, which somehow must have been left in my chart from his office, I would have been 41 weeks. However, my due date had then gotten changed later on in my pregnancy based on how she was growing, to the 16th. So I think that's where that confusion came from. It's not really applicable to the story, except for that's why they admitted me. I told Jason, I said, God works in mysterious ways. Like I know that was when I was supposed to have my baby. I know that I was in true labor at that point. And thankfully it kept them from sending me home or, anything like that. I was like, God works in mysterious ways. I did not have my baby on the side of the road. 41 weeks, sure, whatever. So they admitted me. We get into the room and everything, and we're having, I say we, I'm having contractions. Jason and I are working through it. We get all this stuff done, all the normal things. My nurse then comes in at like 11:30, maybe like 11, and says, hey, like the anesthesiologist is coming in to give someone else their epidural. So if you are wanting yours, like now would be a kind of a great time to get it. And I'm like, I'm not really at the point where I feel like I need it. Like I'm having contractions, they're painful, but like I'm working through it. She's like, okay, just so you know, because it is a rural hospital where I delivered at, it's not like metropolitan area. She's like, just so you know, the doctor lives about 45 minutes away. He works on call. It takes some time. She's like, so realistically, if you look at me and say you want an epidural, it's going to take about 2 hours until you're in the bed comfortable again. I'm like, okay. So she also tells me at this point that my contractions have started to space out. They haven't stopped, but they went from 3 to 4 minutes to about 5 minutes. And so they started to space. So she's like, we're going to start you on Pitocin just to make sure that we're still progressing. I'm like, okay. So she leaves the room, Jason and I talk. And I'm like, maybe I should just get it right now because there's no guarantee I'm going to be able to get it if it's going to take 2 hours. Also, I've heard that when they start you on Pitocin, your contractions get 10 times stronger. And I was like, so maybe now since we're starting Pitocin, it's just a good time to get it. I thought I was going to be in labor for a really, really long time. So I was like, I don't know how long this is going to last. At least if I get the epidural, I can rest a little bit tonight, before tomorrow and everything. Just to not be awake for, 48 hours or something crazy. So we talk, we decide like, yeah, I should just get it now. It doesn't do it. If I'm going to get an epidural anyways, it doesn't do anything except for impact me, if I get it now versus I get it in a couple hours or whenever I feel comfortable or uncomfortable enough, I guess, to get it. So she comes back in, I say, hey, like while the anesthesiologist is here, like I'll just go ahead and get my epidural now. She's like, okay. So that's a whole process. You have to have 1 full bag of fluids, IV fluids, before you can get an epidural. It's very common for your blood pressure to drop, which is why they do it that way. They also check you to make sure that you're, not imminently going to have a baby, which I wasn't, but, they still check you. So at that point I was at a 5. They start me on the Pitocin. They start me on the IV fluids. the doctor comes in to give me my epidural. Now you have to do like this like arched back thing when you get an epidural, which I did, and I thought I was doing well. However, the doctor ended up telling me that I just have very small spaces in between my spine, and so he stuck my back 4 times. You can research how an epidural is done if you want to. I don't want to scare anybody. However, he stuck into my spine 4 times, and by the second one, I was in pain. They give you a numbing shot, so you shouldn't really feel, you should just feel pressure, you shouldn't feel pain. However, I felt pain, and I was sitting there visibly in so much pain, and he's like, "You're feeling this?" And I'm like, "Yes." So he gave me another shot, another numbing shot, and I still felt it. By the end, by the 4th one, he ended up having to go up a couple spaces. Usually there's like a certain amount of notches in your spine they like to hit. He ended up having to go up one in order to get it through, because he kept hitting bone. Again, not trying to scare anybody, but just, putting it out there. And by that point, I was sobbing. Like, I was in tears. I was in so much pain. It hurt so bad. But we got it done. I have 0 regrets about doing my epidural. It was like, I say 5 minutes. It might have even been less than that. It might have been like 3 minutes of pain, to not have pain the rest of my labor. And I had a really great epidural. Just spoiler alert, after he got it in, fantastic epidural. I still had feeling in my legs, but no pain. I could move my legs. I could move myself pretty much. I wasn't standing, obviously, they keep you in bed, but I put my feet like in the stirrups when it was time to push. Like, I had really great epidural and complete control, and all the nurses and the doctors kept commenting on it. They're like, "That's a great epidural." So afterwards, fantastic. I have 0 regrets about getting it. However, the experience was a little traumatic. So that happened. They lay me down. He goes to give me the first dose of medicine. Now, before he does this, he does ask me, are you feeling any ringing in your ears? Are you feeling lightheaded? Like, all these things he asked me. I don't remember. I remember the ringing in the ears thing. And I'm like, no, like, I feel fine. So, okay. So he goes to give me the first dose of medicine. And I'm sitting there. We obviously have masks on. And I start, like, not being able to breathe. Like, I feel like I can't get air. So I'm like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I take my mask off. I'm like, I can't breathe. He's like, you can breathe, just deep breaths. I'm like, no, I cannot breathe. Like, there is something wrong. I can't breathe. I then start getting really hot and really like flushed. And then I start hearing ringing in my ears. And I'm like, my ears are ringing. You asked me before if that was wrong. Like, it's happening now. Like, something's not right. And so he's like, okay, again, your blood pressure can drop. It's very common with an epidural. So because of that, they keep a blood pressure cuff on you that continuously monitors your blood pressure. So the blood pressure cuff goes off, takes my blood pressure. My blood pressure was at 70/30, which is extremely low if you don't know like normal blood pressure range. Extremely low blood pressure. So the nurse is like, okay, your blood pressure is low. We're going to give you this dose of blood pressure medicine to help bring it back up. I'm like, well, thank goodness, because I feel like I'm dying. I was so scared. Also, you hear some horror stories about epidurals. So the epidural part was like one of the scariest parts for me already. And I think that contributed to my reaction. I thought I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like, I feel like I'm dying. So they give me the blood pressure medication. Blood pressure goes back up. I feel significantly better. I was just scared. So that's what happened. And I had no more pain. My blood pressure did drop one more time throughout the night. Then when you have an epidural, they roll you from side to side and they put like a peanut ball in between your legs to try to help keep your body in a good position for labor to progress. And so they had just rolled me over to my right side. And I'm laying there and I'm like, hun, to my husband, I'm like, hun, I need you to call the nurse. Like, I don't feel right. Like, I started feeling nauseous. I started feeling really hot. Like, I was trying to drink water. I just didn't feel right. So he calls the nurse. She comes in. I tell her what I'm feeling. And I'm like, can I roll over to my left side again? She's like, yeah, we'll get you rolled over. She's like trying to get the blood pressure to go off and check my signs and stuff. And she's like, I'm like, no, I need to roll now. And I don't necessarily remember it, but Jason says that I just started like rolling myself. Like, I just started turning. I'm like, I need to go to my left side now. And so I just started turning myself. She helped me roll over. My blood pressure had dropped again. Luckily, it was not as bad as the time before. She gave me a little bit more of the blood pressure medication and it didn't happen again. So it did happen one more time throughout the night. I had my epidural about 11:30. I don't know exactly what time this happened, but I will say, if you want to know anything about how the epidural experience went, again, I had feeling in my legs, but they were like tingly, like if they're falling asleep, that's how they felt. I also had the shakes so bad. Like, my whole labor experience, I had terrible shakes, like uncontrollably. And I'm not exactly sure if it was the epidural, if it was adrenaline, hormones, because it actually is pretty common to happen in labor anyways, is for you to shake. So I'm not sure if it was that. I'm not sure if it was a side effect of the blood pressure medication. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I was like shaking, like uncontrollably shaking the whole time. So yeah, so essentially after that, not much happened. We kind of slept on and off throughout the night. Jason was on his little couch. I was in the bed trying to sleep as best I could. I was uncomfortable and shaking, and so I didn't get a ton of sleep, but I did try to sleep as much as I could. The nurse would come in, check on me, everything like that. I remember her coming in at about, I want to say like 5, might have been a different time than that. I want to say 5, and saying that she had finally got my contractions, like steady. My whole labor, my contractions were never consistently, 2 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart, or anything. They just, kind of were sporadic. And so she's like, I finally got them, consistent off the Pitocin. I'm like, okay, great. So they never checked me again, never checked to see if my cervix was dilated, nothing. Just kind of let me sleep throughout the night. So then at 7 in the morning, that's when they do shift change. So the doctor who was there overnight comes in. First time I had seen him, he comes in, and he's like, okay, we're gonna check you. Literally wakes me up. Like, I was sleeping at this point. He's like, knocks on the door. He's like, hey, it's doctor. I'm not gonna say his name, but it's the doctor. Like, can I come in? And I'm like, yeah, like, go ahead. So literally wakes me up out of sleep. He comes in. In my head, I'm like, I'm not having this baby till like this afternoon, this evening. Like, I'm gonna be here for, all day, just trying to stay occupied, essentially. So he comes in, he checks me, he's like, yep, you're complete, which complete means that your cervix is completely dilated to a 10 and you're 100% effaced. And so he's like, yep, you're complete. My water never broke. So he's like, I'm gonna break your water now just to try to get baby to come lower. But he's like, we're gonna have a baby in soon, like in a few hours or whatever. I'm like, okay, like I was like asleep, like what? We're gonna have a baby soon? Okay. So he breaks my water. He's gonna go off for the day. He's like, so-and-so's gonna take over. This is your new nurse, whatever. They'll be in to start pushing. So I'm like, okay. Then my nurse tells me, she's like, the doctors get really excited. They think that you're gonna push sooner. She's like, probably will be a couple hours before baby descends low enough so we can start pushing. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, again, in my head, I'm like, I wasn't expecting to have this baby till this afternoon, this evening. So if we start pushing in a few hours, sounds great to me. I was not prepared for that. So then my new nurse comes in and we're talking, she's checking in on me. She knows where we're at in labor. She's like, okay, so you start feeling any like pressure down there, like you need to let me know, because that means that baby is, getting close. She's like, and I don't want to be catching the baby. She's a really great nurse. Again, my nurses were fantastic. My doctors were fantastic. And so she's like, they say if you feel like you have to poop, this is such a TMI video. You should know that going into labor. Sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. So she's like, if you feel that like pressure, like I need to know, because I need to check you. And so as she's talking to me, I'm like, well, yeah, like I feel pressure down there. Like, I was like, not intense, but like I feel it. She's like, okay, like because you said that, I'm gonna check you again. So she checks me. She's like, yep, baby's lower. She's like, we're gonna start pushing. And I'm like, okay. And this is probably like 7:30, maybe 7:45. They get everything set up, and getting ready to start pushing. And I started pushing. I think the time frame was about 45 minutes. However, it was not consistent pushing. They kept losing her heartbeat. She was moving around, and so they kept having to move that. So like when that would happen, she's like, we're not going to push this round. We're just going to, find baby. At one point, her heartbeat did drop for her. She had a fast heart rate my entire pregnancy, but my entire labor as well. And so her heart rate dropped for her. They're like, we're just going to give you an extra dose of fluids to help bring baby's heart rate back up. She did say we have to let the doctor know. She's like, we're not going to have a C-section. We're going to push this baby out. We just have to let the doctor know what's going on. So again, fantastic nurses. Like the fact that she was like, we have to let him know, but we're not having a C-section. That's not where we're headed. Like, you're good, mama, was so reassuring to me. Fantastic nurses. So they give me extra fluids, her heart rate goes back up. So like with those little complications, it took a little bit longer, but I really wasn't pushing the whole time. I want to say I had maybe like 5 sets of pushes with the nurse. And then it's so funny because she asked me, she's like, do you want to feel baby's head? Like, are you someone who wants to do that? Because some moms do, some moms don't. Totally respect whatever you choose to do, mama. I was like, yeah, like I want to feel her head. So I felt her head. Jason felt her head. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so exciting. She said too, the first time I started pushing, she's like, oh my gosh, she has a ton of hair. I'm like, oh, yes. Like I had a really bad acid reflux and heartburn during my pregnancy. And the urban legend is if you have acid reflux, baby has lots of hair. So I said my whole pregnancy, as long as she comes out with a ton of hair, it'll be worth it. So if you can see my beautiful little girl right here, she came out with this much hair. She came out with a ton of hair. But that's the first thing the nurse said when I started pushing. She has a ton of hair. I'm like, yes, okay. So I felt her head. Jason felt her head. That was such good motivation. And then I had a really good set of pushes afterwards, and my nurse commented on that. She's like, oh, that must have been motivating for you. And the other nurse who was in the room helping, she was like, well, do you want a mirror, like, to see what's going on? I was like, yeah, if you want to bring a mirror, like, I'll take one. So she brought a mirror in so I could see. And so I could see her head, like, coming lower and coming out. And I wanted her to come at 38 weeks. Like, I was so ready to meet my daughter. I was just so anxious to meet her. So in my head, I'm like, you are the only person who has control over when you get to meet her. Like, you are the difference between meeting her right now and meeting her in an hour. Like, you are the only person who gets to control that based on how much you push, how hard you push. So I saw her head, like, coming, like, getting closer, and it was the biggest motivation for me. I did one set of pushes with the mirror, and my nurse was like, okay, we're gonna call for the doctor. We're not gonna push anymore until he gets here. Pretty much saying, like, she was right there, like, ready to come out. And they had me, I don't remember exactly what they did. I don't know if they had to change something under me. I think the bed had to come down. I don't exactly remember. But they had to have me lift my butt up a little bit. And again, because I could feel everything, like my legs and stuff as far as moving them. I like lifted up. She's like, no, not that much. Like, don't make this baby pop out on me. So yeah, so she was like right there, ready to come. So then they get ready, you know, I'm just waiting, we're having contractions. I'm not feeling them. Honestly, with my epidural, the pushing part was my favorite part of the whole thing. I just remember like talking to Jason, talking to the nurse, like we were just conversing. It was like fun. Like I say it was fun. It was so enjoyable for me, and it was so exciting because I knew that my daughter was right there. I knew I was going to meet her, and I was so present, and I could feel the contractions were coming because you kind of like have this like feeling. It's not really pressure. It's this like feeling, but it's not painful. It's not painful at all. But I could just tell. So it's like, okay, we're having a contraction. Okay, we're going to push. So we wait a couple contractions. The doctor comes in. I pushed once. I pushed once with her. Once the doctor was there, I pushed once, and out she came. Like I didn't have to push her head out and then push her body. Like literally pushed once, and out she came. And I just remember like him holding her up because I really thought I was gonna have to push more. Like you hear these things, you know, I thought I was gonna have to push and then push her body out. No, literally I pushed, she came out, her whole body came out, and he held her up, and she cried instantly. She cried instantly, which is the best thing you want to hear as a mama. Like it's just your baby crying, knowing their lungs are working, they're okay, they're breathing. So she cried instantly. He held her up, and I just like I could not tell you what else happened in the world. The hospital literally could have exploded, and I would not have known. I don't know what happened in the room. I don't know who was in the room. I just saw my baby. I just wanted my baby. And so he held her up. I have this like clear picture in my head of her like being held up. And then they put her on my chest, and I just stared at her. I couldn't tell you what else happened. I just looked at her. I just stared at her, and I cried. And Jason says he kissed me because I told him after, I was like, honey, I didn't kiss you. I'm so sorry. And he's like, no, you kissed me. Like we kissed. We said, oh my gosh, it's our daughter. Like she's here, and we kissed. And I was like, we did? Like I literally couldn't tell you anything else that was going on. I just like looked at my baby and was the happiest moment of my entire life. While that was going on, my placenta came out. I didn't have to push out my placenta. I know a lot of people do. They kind of say like you have to birth your placenta, you have to push it out. I didn't. Jason said the doctor just pulled it out, and I didn't feel any of it. He said the doctor just pulled it out, got rid of it, you know, and then started stitching me up. I did tear. I teared both directions. I had a 2nd degree tear down and a minor laceration up, essentially, like towards my urethra. So I did tear. So he stitched me up. You know, he told me that after they took her to weigh her. And measure her and everything. When I was ready, they asked me like, whenever you're ready, mama, like we'll go weigh her and, you know, get her kind of wiped off. And I was like, okay, yeah, like you can take her now. So while they were doing that, he was like telling me, he's like, okay, so you have a 2nd degree tear. And he's like, and you have a little bit up here. I'm going to give you 1 stitch up here. But yeah, that was it. And, you know, he stitched me up. He said, okay, you're all good. I don't know the medical stuff that happened after that. I know they like push on your belly to make sure your uterus is shrinking. That happens a lot throughout your stay. But they weighed her. She was born at 8:23 in the morning. She weighed 6 pounds, 1 ounce, and she was 19 3/4 inches long. The most perfect thing in the entire world. And I know I'm her mama. I know I made her, but like the most perfect baby in the entire world. They brought her back over to me, and I just held her, and it was the most blissful 24 hours. One of the hardest 24 hours in the hospital, but the most blissful 24 hours. Like I said, we were there for a little over 24 hours. We got discharged about noon, 1 o'clock the next day. both of us were doing great. Baby excelled at all of her tests. Excelled, like passed it right away. And I was feeling great. As far as labor goes, it was hard to sit. I was uncomfortable. They did give me some ibuprofen and some of the like numbing spray, and after I got that, I felt significantly better. Yeah, I mean, it was hard. Like I remember being so like in bliss, and I think that helped. But the next day, so the third day after she was born, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt awful yesterday, and I didn't even realize how bad I felt. It hurt to sit, it hurt to stand. Like it was uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie. But I just, like, it was the happiest 24 hours. Like, we just held our baby and we just sent pictures to our friends and family and FaceTimed them, because obviously they couldn't come visit because of COVID in the hospital. So we just were FaceTiming people and sharing her. And it was just the happiest 24 hours of my entire life. The hardest, the happiest. So yeah, you know, my epidural wears off. They get you out, go to the bathroom, all those sorts of postpartum things. And yeah, I felt great. Like my uterus was shrinking. She's like, oh yeah, you feel fantastic. Like it's already super low and your bleeding is great and everything like that. So the next day we were just waiting to get discharged pretty much. We were dressed, packed, and we were just waiting for the doctor to like come in and check me, because I think her pediatrician had already cleared her. Just to come in and check me and say that I was good. And they're like, oh, you seem anxious to go home. We're like, yeah, like super anxious to go home. Just because, you know, we wanted to like start our life. We didn't want to be in the hospital anymore, like our life with her, you know, like have all our stuff at home. And also we wanted our family to meet her. You know, no one could come to the hospital, so we wanted our families to come and meet her. And yeah, so it was just, or like I said, around noon the next day, we got cleared, we got to go home. And we came home, and not everyone, her grandparents, most of the grandparents came over and met her, and it was amazing. And it's been an amazing 6 weeks. Jason thankfully had 6 weeks off for work, paid time off. And so he's been home. We've just literally been in newborn bliss, like doing nothing except for staring at her, taking care of her, hanging out. Like it's just been amazing. And she's been amazing. And yeah, that's her birth story essentially. I don't know how to like wrap this up. But yeah, that's essentially what happened. And she did great in the hospital. She's been great since we've been home. I want to share kind of about our breastfeeding journey in a separate video, because that was a journey. But yeah, it's just been amazing. Just an amazing time in our lives. And my labor was so easy. I can have like 0 complaints. I know there was a couple complications with the epidural. And yeah, recovering from birthing is challenging. Like I was uncomfortable, but like that's to be expected, right? Like you're pushing a human out. But it was just so amazing, and it was so easy. Like I was like, oh my gosh, if every labor could be like this, I'd have a million kids. Like, and I won't, obviously, but yeah, it was so fantastic. So that's it. Thank you guys for sitting here and listening to my birth story. I hope it was entertaining. I hope it didn't scare anybody out of having children. It's really not that bad, really. You can do it. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being here. The next video I think is going to be about our breastfeeding journey, but it might be a vlog or something too. We are going to Disney in 2 weeks, so if I get it up before then, great. If not, it'll be after those vlogs. So thanks for being here. I will see you guys in our next video. Bye, friends.